Well, let's go to the U.S. Capitol now and get more on this with Mohammed Abu-Nimer. He's a professor of peace and conflict resolution at the American University. It's really good to have you on the program, Professor. And now it's really
Thank you.
concerning for so many that it appears we're no closer to a ceasefire, especially as it gets closer to the Muslim fasting month of Ramadan. You recently published an article where you wrote, quote, religious leaders and their institutions are also caught in the polarization of this war. How does this affect interfaith dialogue, and should religious leaders be taking more of a stand?
Thank you. Yes, religious leaders, I think, are a powerful force in the narration and in the creation of the story of the war in Israel, and particularly in this war, where the Prime Minister himself, Netanyahu, and also many of his cabinet ministers, and also other people surrounding him, have been using the Old Testament, the Bible, to justify the use of the brutal attack and the ethnic cleansing in the Gaza area. And I think the use of religious stories, religious narrative, has become in many ways very clear in this round of the war on Gaza. Similarly, also, I think, in general, Hamas is using the Islamic faith as well as a form of resistance to the genocide and to the ethnic cleansing campaign Israel is carrying out. So there is no doubt that religious identity have been deployed into this round of the conflict, and therefore, even before this war, religious actors can call and can be active more on the two sides in order to de-escalate the conflict, in order to persuade the Israeli Jewish public that what's going on in Gaza is against Judaic belief system and major values of Judaism. And I think that message, unfortunately, has not come across very clear. On the contrary, some religious leaders have justified it.
Mohammed, when this war does eventually end, will there be any real winner, regardless of what the outcome is, for Palestinians or Israelis here?
Well, it depends how you define winners, but I think in general, from history of humans in general, wars do not necessarily bring peace. War bring more hatred and more violence, and it's a cycle that feeds into war. And I think Israeli government and Israeli Zionist movement in general should have learned the lesson since 1882, when they began their settler colonialism project in Palestine, that war and violence will not necessarily persuade the Palestinian to give up their quest for liberation, for dignity, and for independence. And this is this is more than 15 wars between or that has been launched, and also between Israeli and Palestinian, and Arabs and Israel. And unfortunately, that lesson has not been learned. On the contrary, we have been seeing in the past 40 years or so a significant escalation, and today we're talking about the genocide. We're talking about full ethnic cleansing. These measures, we did not see them in the 80s, we did not see them in the 90s, or even the early 2000s. And that's unfortunately a lesson that the Israeli Zionist movement, that rely on security rather than on equality, on freedom for both people in this land, has not learned. And I'm not sure this government is in a position to learn this lesson. This government came in power about a year and a half ago, mainly with this plan, the plan to try what they call to settle the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, to bring it to a solution through war. And unfortunately, that's what they are engaged in.
Mohammed Abu-Nimer in Washington, D.C. Really appreciate your analysis. Thank you so much.
Thank you.